Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today we're jumping right into a matchup that has literally defined professional basketball for decades. We're talking about the Philadelphia 76ers and the Boston Celtics. Why do they share the most historic, the most fiercely contested, and honestly, the most emotionally exhausting rivalry in the entire history of the NBA? Well, if you follow the league, you already know. These two teams, they don't just play basketball, they go to war.
To really grasp the absolute weight of this rivalry, we've got to start right at the explosive climax of the 2023 Eastern Conference semifinals. Picture it. Game 7, winner takes all, and Jason Tatum just goes off, dropping a staggering, record-breaking 51 points. It was an absolute masterclass. It left Philly fans in stunned silence, and Boston fans, well, they were in absolute euphoria.
Right after that heartbreaking elimination, then-league MVP Joel Embiid dropped a brutally honest quote. He said, "This is not a rivalry. They always kick our ass." I mean, wow. When your franchise superstar is saying that out loud, you just know there's some deep, deep historical wounds at play here.
Okay, Section 1, a historic Game 7. Let's unpack exactly what went down in that 2023 showdown, because it's honestly the perfect microcosm of the whole dynamic between these two franchises.
It's actually wild when you break down the numbers from that series. It mathematically proves a narrative that Sixers fans absolutely dread. Al Horford, a veteran guy that Reddit fans jokingly call an AARP member, literally neutralized the league MVP. When Horford was guarding him, Embiid averaged a measly 11.8 points and shot a dismal 37.9% from the field. It wasn't just defense, it was a total defensive clinic. And the sheer magnitude of that collapse, it's staggering. Just think about the context. The 76ers actually held a 3-2 series lead. They had the chance to close the whole thing out at home in Game 6. But nope, the Celtics forced a Game 7 back in Boston. And in that finale, Philadelphia's biggest stars just imploded. Embiid and James Harden combined for more turnovers, 9 of them, than made field goals, which was only 8. Boston dominated that final game 112-88, adding yet another tragic chapter to Philly's playoff history.
So the big question we have to ask ourselves is, where did this dynamic begin? Why does Boston breaking Philadelphia's heart feel less like an upset and more like an inevitable time loop?
Let's rewind the clock for Section 2. Wilt, Russell, and Origins. This dynamic has been building since the foundational era of the NBA, the era of the Giants.
Looking way back at the 1950s, this rivalry actually started with the 76ers, who were then the Syracuse Nationals, beating Boston in 3 straight playoffs. Can you believe that? But then 1956 happens. The Celtics acquire Bill Russell, and the scales completely tip into an era of overwhelming Boston dominance. Now, the 76ers did manage to snap Boston's crazy 8-year championship run in 1967, led by Wilt Chamberlain. But those rare moments of triumph were almost always overshadowed by Boston just winning and winning and winning. And that overwhelming success is exactly where Embiid's modern-day frustration comes from. Out of an incredible 22 all-time playoff series between these two franchises, which, by the way, is the most of any two teams in NBA history, the Celtics have won 15 of them. 15! That is a massive historical weight for any franchise to carry around.
We constantly see this fascinating juxtaposition throughout NBA history. On one side, Philadelphia often claims all the regular season glory and the big individual accolades. Think Wilt Chamberlain winning MVPs back in the day, or Joel Embiid doing it recently. But on the other side, Boston just ruthlessly executes when it actually matters in the postseason. That results in championship rings perfectly embodied by Bill Russell's legendary career.
This whole dynamic was basically immortalized back in 1965. Picture a super tense Game 7 of the Eastern Division Finals. Boston is clinging to a tiny 1-point lead. With just 5 seconds left on the clock, Boston's John Havlicek famously steals the inbound pass, saves the victory, and honestly sparks a generational curse for Philly. It's moments exactly like that one that built the psychological foundation of this rivalry.
All right, skipping ahead a bit, we enter Section 3. The Golden Era fights. This is the 1980s, where this matchup evolved from foundational basketball into literal on-court warfare.
The 1980s were totally defined by intense, incredibly physical clashes between Larry Bird's Celtics and Julius Erving's Sixers. These guys despised each other. In 1981, Boston overcomes a 3-1 series deficit just to break Philly's heart again.
The animosity gets so bad that by 1983, a preseason exhibition game, featured 3 separate fights. It even got legendary 66-year-old Celtics coach Red Auerbach fined $2,500 for storming the court. And of course, you can't forget the iconic 1985 choking match between Bird and Dr. J. I mean, it was just raw, unadulterated competition.
But right in the middle of all that bad blood, something kind of incredible happened. In a super rare moment of ultimate respect, Philadelphia finally managed to beat Boston in the 1982 Game 7, avoiding another collapse. And as the game ended, the raucous Boston Garden crowd actually started chanting "Beat LA" to support the 76ers in the finals against the Lakers. It just goes to show that beneath all the hatred, there's this deep mutual respect for the level of basketball they were playing.
Of course, Philadelphia wasn't without their own psychological weapons during that era. Meet Andrew Toney. Sports writers aptly nicknamed him the Boston Strangler because of his terrifying ability to just take over playoff games and single-handedly torch the Celtics defense. He was basically the bogeyman for Boston in the early 80s, to the point where the Celtics literally had to go out and acquire defensive ace Dennis Johnson just to stop him.
Now, let's bring it all back to the present with Section 4, the modern-day resurgence. Let's look at how history keeps repeating itself and haunting this matchup today.
When you look at the modern loop, Boston's mastery almost seems to extend beyond the basketball court and straight into the front office. Think back to 2017. The Celtics actually traded the #1 overall pick, which Philly used on Markelle Fultz, so Boston could move down to number 3 and grab Jason Tatum. That single, brilliant move basically set the stage for consecutive, brutal playoff eliminations of the Sixers. A 4-1 loss in 2018, a sweep in 2020, and then that devastating 2023 comeback we talked about earlier.
And when you compare the top modern playoff scores in this rivalry, it's wild to see Jason Tatum's incredible efficiency sitting right smack in the middle of Sixers legends Allen Iverson and Joel Embiid. Tatum has truly become the modern-day architect of Philadelphia's playoff misery. He's doing exactly what Havlicek and Bird did in the past.
What you should really take away from all this is just how deep the psychological warfare actually goes. Get this, the Sixers actually acquired Al Horford in free agency for a year back in 2019. Fans and analysts love to joke that Philly signed him strictly so he couldn't guard Embiid anymore. But in the 2025 and 2026 seasons, after a super close, nail-biting NBA Cup game in October, the 76ers secured a playoff spot in April 2026. Riding that high, Philly fans started boldly chanting "We want Boston" after winning their play-in game. But man, the echo of history is just swift and cruel. Celtics fans immediately mocked that exact chant during a brutal 32-point blowout win in Game 1 of their series. The cycle just keeps continuing. So I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder. When you consider the sheer historical dominance, I'm talking 15 series wins to 7, the iconic steals, the agonizing Game 7 heartbreaks, is this actually a true sports rivalry? Or is it just a 70-year recurring nightmare for the city of Philadelphia? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on